Have you ever felt like God is just late? Like you've been praying, crying out, checking the clock, and watching the calendar turn, but heaven is completely silent? You did everything right. You had faith. You asked according to His will. But the deadline came and went, and the miracle didn't happen. If you're sitting in the ashes of a missed deadline right now, wondering why God didn't show up when you needed Him most, you really need to hear this. I remember when I hit my absolute breaking point with waiting. A few years ago, something happened that changed how I see this entirely. I was facing a situation that had a very real, very terrifying expiration date. It was a financial crisis that threatened to completely unravel my family's stability. I had prayed every single day. I fasted. I stood on every promise in the Bible I could find. I was so convinced that God was going to swoop in at the 11th hour and provide a miraculous rescue. But the 11th hour passed. Then the 12th. The deadline hit, the consequence fell, and my world felt like it shattered. I remember sitting on the floor of my bedroom, tears streaming down my face, feeling not just sad, but deeply betrayed. I asked, God, why did you let this happen? Why did you wait so long? Did you forget about me? It is a terrifying place to be when your theology collides with your reality, and suddenly, God feels unreliable. I felt foolish for having so much hope, but it was in that dark, painful, seemingly hopeless aftermath that I stumbled back into the 11th chapter of John. I read the story of Lazarus not as a distant historical event, but through the desperate, tear-soaked eyes of someone who knew exactly what it felt like to watch a deadline pass while God was seemingly nowhere to be found. And what I discovered in that story completely shattered my misunderstanding of God's timing. The first thing we have to understand is that God's delay is never a sign of His denial, nor is it a sign of His indifference. In John chapter 11, verses 5 and 6, we read something that sounds almost contradictory at first glance. It says, "Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when He heard that Lazarus was ill, He stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was." Let that sink in for a moment. He loved them, so He delayed. In our human minds, love rushes to the rescue. If we love someone and they're hurting, we drop everything. We speed, we run red lights, we do whatever it takes to get there immediately. But Jesus intentionally stayed away for 2 more days. Why? Because His love isn't bound by our human panic. He loved them too much to just give them a quick fix when He was setting the stage for a resurrection. Think about a master artist working on a painting. To the untrained eye, the artist might seem to be taking far too long, mixing dark colors that don't make sense, pausing to let layers dry. The observer might say, "Hurry up, finish the picture." But the artist knows that true masterpieces can't be rushed. The dark colors are necessary for the depth. The waiting is necessary for the texture. Jesus wasn't ignoring the sisters' desperate message. He wasn't distracted by other, more important things. He was holding their pain in one hand and His ultimate glorious purpose in the other. When you're waiting, it's so easy to believe the lie that God is withholding good from you because He's angry or simply because He doesn't care. But what if His delay is actually the most profound evidence of His love? What if He's letting the situation reach a point of absolute human impossibility so that when the breakthrough comes, there will be no doubt that it was His hand that did it? If God is making you wait right now, He isn't ignoring you. He's setting the stage for something far bigger than you asked for. This brings us to a really difficult truth, but one that is absolutely vital for our peace. Sometimes, God lets the thing die. He lets the deadline pass. When Jesus finally arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. In the historical and cultural context of that time, there was a common belief that a person's spirit hovered around the body for 3 days, hoping to return. But by the 4th day, the spirit departed, and the body began to irreversibly decay. 4 days meant it was over. It was final. The situation was beyond any human or spiritual hope. Martha runs out to Jesus in John chapter 11, verse 21, and says the exact words that so many of us have screamed into our pillows. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Have you ever prayed an "if only" prayer? Lord, if only you had moved the heart of that hiring manager, I wouldn't have lost my home. Lord, if only you had healed my loved one, I wouldn't be planning a funeral. Lord, if only you had stepped in, my marriage wouldn't have ended. We get so fixated on the prevention of pain, we think God's only job is to keep bad things from happening. But Jesus operates on a completely different level. He didn't come to just prevent the crisis. He came to resurrect the dead. He let Lazarus die because he wanted to shift Martha and Mary's faith from believing in a God who merely heals to a God who holds the very keys of life and death. Sometimes, God will let a dream die. He'll let a relationship end. He'll let a bank account drain to zero. Not to punish you, but because He wants to show you that His power doesn't stop where human possibilities end. We think the end of the story is the tomb. We roll the heavy stone in front of our dead dreams and walk away grieving. But God does His absolute best work in graveyards. When He lets something die, it's often because He is preparing to birth something entirely new, something that carries His unmistakable resurrection power. But here is the deepest, most beautiful part of this entire story. Even when God knows the glorious ending, He still sits with us in the painful middle. We see this in the shortest, yet most profound verse in the entire Bible. John chapter 11, verse 35. Jesus wept. Think about the sheer magnitude of this moment. Jesus knew exactly what He was about to do. He knew that in less than 5 minutes Lazarus would be walking out of that tomb, breathing, laughing, and wrapped in his grave clothes. He knew that Martha and Mary's mourning was about to turn into the most explosive joy they had ever experienced. If it were us, we might have walked up to them and said, "Stop crying! Wipe your tears. You're about to look so foolish for doubting me. Just wait and see what I'm going to do." But Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't rush their grief. He doesn't belittle their pain with Christian cliches. He looks at Mary, He looks at the mourning crowd, He sees the devastation that death has caused, and His heart breaks right alongside theirs. He enters fully into their sorrow. The tears of Jesus tell us something incredibly powerful about the character of God. He isn't a distant, stoic boss who just hands out miracles on a strict schedule. He is a tender, compassionate friend who feels the heavy weight of your heartbreak. Right now, you might be in that awful space between the death of a dream and the resurrection God is planning. You might feel completely abandoned and alone. But look closely. Jesus is standing right there in the graveyard with you, and He's crying with you. Your pain moves His heart. He validates your tears even when He knows the joy that is coming in the morning. This is the ultimate climax of our faith, trusting a God who is powerful enough to raise the dead, but intimate enough to cry with us while we wait. He isn't just the God of the breakthrough. He is the God of the waiting room. He is the God of the delayed promise. And He is holding you so tightly in this very moment. So what do we do when we're trapped in this painful waiting period? How do we practically navigate the days when God feels incredibly late? I want to give you 3 specific things you can do today. First, I want you to write down your dead things. Take a physical piece of paper today and write down the dreams, the situations, or the relationships that feel like they're past the point of no return. Don't hide them. Acknowledge them before God. Second, surrender the timeline. Say out loud, God, I give you permission to work on your schedule, not mine. Stop checking the clock and start looking at his character. Remind yourself of who he is. Third, invite Jesus into your grief. Don't try to put on a brave face and pretend everything is fine. Tell him you're angry. Tell him you're hurt. Let him weep with